who's here. Oh, and that's also another good point. This meeting is being recorded, so if you do want to have a copy of that, then Gary will be able to share that at the end. You know, please let us know. I'm going to hand in a minute to David on behalf of Warwickshire Climate Alliance, but just to make sure that we know who is here and who's speaking, because as we know, as we come up to the county council elections, of course, that time for that candidate and so on is coming to an end for the councillor. So as we start to look to who to vote for, these sort of hustings are very important. So I'm going to just introduce one by one. We have Heather Timms, who's a Conservative councillor for Earl, Craven. We have Jenny Fradgley, who is Liberal Democrat councillor for Stratford West. John Holland, who's the Labour councillor for Warwick West, and Jonathan Chilvers, Green Party councillor for Leamington, Brunswick. So first of all, it's wonderful to have the whole spread of the parties, and again, many thanks for them to attend this evening. So without further ado, I'm just going to hand over to David Mond from the Warwickshire Climate Alliance, just to say a little bit about why we're organising this event before we kick off with the questions. So over to you, David.
Thanks very much, Alan, and thank you everybody for coming tonight. It's brilliant that so many have joined, and I think it's an indication that how many people see this as being crucial. So I think that climate change is really the biggest challenge that humanity has ever faced, and that it makes a demand for joint action and cooperation across all boundaries, the likes of which we've never really before had to meet. So many local groups are already working to solve problems locally, to take small-scale local action, and to persuade government, both local and national, to take more resolute action. Many vested interests and a lot of inertia and myopia oppose us. Warwickshire Climate Alliance is an umbrella. What we try to do is bring local groups together and provide a way for different groups to cooperate. We have a website which has our rather mouthful of a name in one word followed by .org. So it's www.warwickshireclimatealliance.org, where we list all the local groups we're aware of and provide contact details so people can get in touch with local groups. And if you want to set up a group, contact us, we'll try to help. I'll speak a little bit more about this right at the very end. We're very grateful to all of the party representatives for agreeing to take part, and for Alan and to Gary Jones, who's put the whole event together for us. So thanks very much, and take it away.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks very much, Dave, for that introduction. So just to sort of put my cards on the table, everybody, the only reason I think I'm here, I hope like everybody else, I certainly have an interest in the planet as well as my locality. I actually run a small organization, but yet a global one. So for the past kind of 20 odd years or so, I've been jetting around the world facilitating international conferences. Don't necessarily feel that good about that now, but I feel a bit better about the fact that Purple Monster is now almost totally a virtual conference company, and that's the business that we're running in. And I feel just slightly smug that a couple of years ago I gave away my car and now only have a bicycle. So I'm not sure whether that puts me in a good place or not. Only you can decide. But my job this evening is really simple. I'm going to just keep moving on all of our councillors. Once they've answered a question, I'm going to give them sort of a minute each or so to get through quite a number of questions. But please, as I say, do keep the chat coming. And if we look at a thread and something comes up that's interesting there, then obviously I can pick that up and use that as an additional question. But to start with, I'm going to ask each of the councillors in turn. Thanks, Anne, for that, the cycling. Yes. I'm going to ask each of the councillors in turn sort of our starting question, which I think is something gentle to get into and not too terrible to begin with. And I'm not sure who this question came from actually, but I think it was an unnamed question. But here it is to start our candidates off. So how big a change must we all in our lifestyle, and how quickly, to save the climate and avoid global warming and its disastrous consequences? So how big a change do we have to make to our lifestyles, and how quickly? So I'm going to start off by asking Heather to give us a minute on that one, please.
Yes, I think, if anything, the last year has taught us is that we all understand we need to change, and also that the digital explosion that has happened over the last year is helping that change. We have a national timetable set by government to which all councils work, and Warwickshire has committed to carbon neutral for council by 2030. I'll give you one interesting fact, though, because I think Warwickshire has been working on this for quite some time. Between 2013 and 2018, the County Council reduced its direct carbon emissions by over 50%. So this is not a new thing for Warwickshire.
Thank you very much, Heather, and beautifully done in time as well, I might say. So thanks for that start. That's great. John, I'm going to come to you next. John Holland, please. John, can you hear us okay? You may need to unmute, John.
Yeah, let's unmute everybody.
Yeah, he's okay. There he is.
Yeah, he's unmuted.
Yeah, okay. We need to make a significant change. Global warming is happening, and it's not just climate change, it's plastic being dumped in the environment, toxic materials, and the change does need to be made, and it does need to be made quickly. I think David Attenborough, with his recent programs, A Perfect Planet, actually hit the nail on the head. The Earth has been around for thousands of millions of years, us for a much shorter time, and we have evolved to suit the Earth as it is. So we need to keep the climate as close as we can to where it is now. And we need to live the sort of lifestyles that we evolved to live. Public health is a county council responsibility, and the Director of Public Health is always advising on healthy lifestyles of taking exercise and diet and so on. And if public health sits above everything the council does, then it will come right. So what we need is all of the staff of the council implementing those strategies.
Thank you, John. And just in answer to Nicola, if the representatives can put their party in there, that will be helpful in their names. But if you can't, don't worry. I'll make sure that everybody's aware of it as I introduce them, and I'm sure we'll get used to that in time. So next, if I could go to Jenny, who, just a reminder, is the Liberal Democrat councillor for Stratford West.
Hi. I sort of became viscerally aware of climate change way back in 1976, if many people here remember that incredibly long hot summer. And I remember, and my children then were quite young, they were 3 and 5, and I remember looking up over the sink at the thermometer, and it was 94 degrees Fahrenheit, and it had been 94 degrees Fahrenheit for days on end. And that gave me a sense that we had to do something rapidly. That was 1976, and we're still in a position saying we've got to be doing something rapidly. We just haven't, as a species, taken on board the seriousness of what we're facing. And I think we're actually, a lot of people in my area, and I think across the globe, are beginning to do small baby steps towards the changes that we need. But when the changes come that are really going to affect us badly, not traveling by air, giving up our cars, all kinds of things like that, that's when we've really got to dig deep and actually make sure that we're up to making the changes ourselves.
Thanks, Jenny. Thank you very much. And finally, with this opening question, we turn to Jonathan Chilvers from the Green Party. Jonathan.
Thank you, Alan, and good evening, everybody. Yeah, I think it won't surprise you to hear that I think we need to make a substantial change rapidly, particularly in all areas of our lives, but particularly food, travel and energy. I'm hesitant. I don't like the word lifestyle in the question. I just sort of question that because I think it makes it sound like an individual thing, whereas I think David Mond said in the introduction, this is about us doing this together, and we're all trapped to some extent in the society we live in. So You can't, if there aren't houses that are of good enough quality and zero carbon, you can't blame individual people for that. That's a collaborative thing that we all need to address as society. So we need rapid and substantial change, but it's not just all about separate individual actions. We need to come together to change the direction of our country together.
Thank you, Jonathan. That's great. So I hope, again, just to make sure that I'll introduce people each time, especially at the start, so you know on behalf of which party they're speaking. So let's just up the ante a little bit here now. And this question, I think that there's at least two people who've owned this question. I suspect there's quite a few people will have been able to sort of back it up and say they'd like to hear it as well. So 2 years ago, Warwickshire County Council declared a climate emergency in July 2019. The situation is even more critical now, but the present County Council policy for climate change is very limited compared with many other councils. So the question here, and again, it says from Nikki Charles and Anne Holland, but I'm sure many more, when will the new council produce a more vital, broader, perhaps, or certainly stronger county climate change emergency policy? So in other words, is there something more to come? And if there is, then if you're elected, when will it come, I suppose? And let's turn to John Holland from Labour, first of all.
Yes, we would get this done very quickly indeed. I think the problem has been the cabinet style of governance of the county council, where portfolio holders have been running things. I sat in on a cabinet meeting where climate change was on a 13-point agenda, and climate change was item number 13. Climate change has got to sit above everything else. And what we would consider, and think this is the way forward, is not to have parties fighting each other, but to go back to the committee system which county councils used to have, and other county councils have moved to the committee system, where people from all political groups come together to agree on a way forward, and the chairman of the committee then speaks on behalf of the committee. So it's not a portfolio holder speaking on behalf of themselves, but a chairman's forming a consensus, and that way we can get quick change which is needed.
Thank you, John. So a suggestion there, not just about the actual policy itself, but something about the way the council is running and how we get things done. So turning there next to Jenny. And again, thank you, Hazel, very kindly for putting that in the chat box there to remind us all. So Jenny from the Liberal Democrats, what's your take on this?
I think John has actually opened up a very interesting way of actually approaching it. I do think there are the county tends to work in silos. Each of the responsibilities and the areas, highways, whatever it, highways, trading standards, whatever, tends to operate within a silo. So people actually talk vertically. They tend not to talk horizontally. And I know that when the adaptation policy motion first went through the county, I think that was way back in 2018, 2019, there were a series of meetings then where we actually got the silos together in one room and people talked across the silos. And there was an incredible buzz and excitement after that, that people that didn't normally talk to each other were talking to each other. And I think some of the enthusiasm for moving on climate change, such as it's been so far, came from a meeting where people who didn't normally talk to each other spoke to each other. And I do think we can only move forward if we stop sitting in our respective parties, but we actually join across the parties and we come up with joint policies that we can actually put forward. However, the county is quite limited in what it can do because the government sets the big, the holistic rules under which we can operate, and they have to move to give local councils more ability to act more quickly.
Okay, thanks, Jenny. And same question going to Jonathan Chilvers next, please, from the Green Party.
Yes, thank you. I agree with the questioner that it is too limited at the moment, and certainly if I had the opportunity, I would be moving this a lot faster. Very briefly, I think the council has 3 roles in this climate emergency. The first is to put its own house in order. And actually, the council are doing okay on that, but not fast enough. So they want to be carbon neutral within their own business, if you like, by 2030. I think that's doable by 2025. The second one is on travel. So the county council has a big role on highways and travel. And to be honest, at the moment, they're doing pretty badly on that, because we still have massive road schemes that the council wants to spend tens of millions of pounds on. So it's at the moment, we're at the word stage, not the action stage on that. And then the third area is the wider leadership that the county have in terms of how do we support businesses and communities to get to net zero as a county. We currently have got some little initiatives on that, but I think there's a lot more that the council can do. In terms of the general speed, I do think in some ways it's not surprising in that we have a deputy Conservative leader of the council who holds the purse strings, who doesn't even believe that climate change is happening. And that's bound to be a pull, no matter how much other members think, on how fast we go. So I just think I wanted to sort of name that one, in that is bound to be slowing the council down so far.
Well, and of course, with a perfect sense of timing, Jonathan, I'm now able, just before I hand on to Conservative Councillor Heather Timms, who can perhaps answer that, it's also just worth keeping an eye on the chat and everybody, because I can see some really great points being made, certainly about the way in which we spend money. We're talking about sort of procurement, and, you know, again, there's a lot of discussion about it being cross-party, and, you know, is there a better way to do it with citizen groups and so on. So again, please, everybody, do keep an eye on the chat, which is really great. And we're coming up to Peter, your question in a minute. So, but in the meantime, first of all, I'll go to you, Heather, with that. Well, the question first, and also I think maybe to answer Jonathan's point too, perhaps.
I'm actually stunned, because all of these parties have been in the room with me. We have a cross-party working group established within the county that has all of the parties represented, and every decision that's been put forward by that group has been approved. So I'm quite stunned by the comments that are coming forward. We've worked really hard to make climate change central to everything we do. Every decision is checked for environmental implications. Our recovery plans, which we held workshops with all of the parties to take forward in the various aspects, actually have climate change as critical to the success of those plans as we work to restore our economy and bring those green jobs into Warwickshire. I don't actually want a policy that sits on a shelf. We all want our staff to embrace climate change as part of the day job, whether they work in transport planning, public health, social care, or supporting the voluntary sector. And if I can just use an example to demonstrate how vital that is, one of our assistant fire officers, because Warwickshire Fire Service does fall within the County Council remit, has recently been appointed to the national body of fire chiefs, with Warwickshire as the lead body on climate change for that service nationally. So I think what we're doing is being recognised, and we do have excellent staff who are embracing climate change right to the heart of the job they do.
Thank you very much, Heather. And again, any comments or any other additional things you want to add, please do put it in the chat. We'll be keeping all this chat, of course, and I'm sure it will be distributed, as indeed the whole thing is being recorded. So make sure you do put your thoughts and opinions in there. In the interest of time, I'm going to keep moving forward to the questions until we've got through the ones that are posted, and then when we have, we can perhaps open it up to a bit more general conversation. This is one that I'm very painfully aware of. I think probably all of us are. And yeah, interesting to find out if our councillors have an answer to this. This question comes from Janet Palmer in Stratford. The Warwickshire County Council Pension Fund, through the local government scheme, holds about £94 million worth of investments in fossil fuel companies. We all recognise the duty of pension trustees for members' retirement incomes, but how can the balance between short-term financial issues and the long-term permanent effect of climate change best be found? I suspect that many people are wrestling with this, not least one of our significant and best clients, BP. So it's an interesting challenge, and one that I'm going to turn first of all to Jenny Fradgley on behalf of the Liberal Democrats. What about these these big funds that are invested in the fossil fuel companies, Jenny?
When I actually read this question, I actually had a conversation with the Liberal Democrat Bill, who actually sits on the pension fund, and I had a conversation with him. He's very passionate in this area and was saying quite clearly that to invest in fossil fuels now is not the way in which smart money is looking. Even large investment companies are beginning to look at investment in fossil fuels as not giving the returns in the future, the near future, medium future, and far future that has been in the past. And so I think there is money now looking as in the county pension fund to invest in green projects. It's not quite as simple as just looking for a green company to invest in. Someone like BP that's been mentioned are looking to actually green themselves, whether it's greenwash or not, and are looking to change the way in which they do things, and therefore looking for investment to boost their change. And perhaps that's what we need to be thinking about. Where do we put the money that we have to make sure that it's safe to give returns to pensioners, because that's its first duty, but then safe to put to improve and support green industries. And I very much hope that these green industries will be developing in and around Warwickshire as well, because we've had a very bad time over COVID, and we need to make sure that investment goes towards our county as well as the larger investments worldwide.
Thanks, Jenny. So yeah, lots of terms in there, isn't there? We've heard a lot about sort of greenwashing, and we've heard about, and as I say, I mentioned that directly. It just happens to be that BP are a client of ours, and they're talking about transformation at the same time as still delivering to their shareholders. Fascinating stuff, and these business leaders have a lot to do. So we'll see what happens when they do it. Interesting comment there from Ken, I just noticed. So Islington only has 2.4% invested in fossil fuel companies. So if they can do it, then surely WCC can as well. So let's pass that and the general challenge anyway on to Jonathan Chilvers next from the Green Party. What do you think, Jonathan?
Yes, so the big challenge and the pushback that we've always received since we've raised this, since I've been a councillor since 2013, is we've got to give the financial best deal to our customers, and our hands are tied. But there is this issue of stranded assets. So if we invest in things and then suddenly everyone withdraws money from fossil fuels when they realise it's no longer sustainable, then that's not going to be good for pension people with a Warwickshire pension. So I think the first thing we need to do is to be pushing the people that invest our employees' money, the people in the pension scheme, to do that research on stranded assets, and to be at the forefront of pushing that thinking forward. I think we're making some progress on that, I understand, but again, it's been very slow, and we've been trying to make it for years. The second part is we get told, we've got financial best case, but there are still exceptions to that. So we don't invest our employees' money in pornography, for instance, whether or not it gives us the best return. We do make an exception for that. So therefore, there is no actual reason why we can't make an exception for other things. So I'm not quite convinced when people say it's not possible to do, because actually we've already done it for a range of things like pornography, gambling, and other things.
Very good. Well, I'm just impressed, Jonathan, that you've managed to get pornography into discussion so amazingly there. And actually, it's probably just as well that nobody bothered investing in that. I don't think it's doing particularly well as an industry, so that's an interesting challenge in itself. But I'll move swiftly along and papering over the cracks quickly. Heather, what about this? Where we're investing our money and whose choice it is?
Yeah. I think you first of all need to understand that Warwickshire's pension fund is within a pension pool provider. So it's in the Border to Coast Pension Partnership. So we just have a subcommittee, and that subcommittee sets what's called the Responsible Investment and Climate Risk Policy. And that policy is going to be used as part of the decision making around all of these issues in the 3-yearly investment strategy review, all pension schemes have to have this review every 3 years, and we're just coming up to ours. So if it's been slow, it's because our review period is where it is. By setting investment priorities, pension funds can influence companies to address climate change, and it's called positive engagement. And that, to be honest, is the first tool that we want to use within the partnership. We also ensure that investment managers are part of what's called the Transition Pathway Initiative, and that assesses the ability of companies to transition to a low carbon economy. And obviously, the other tool in the box for the pension partnership is to look at disinvestment if it's felt that a company has failed to respond to positive engagement for change on climate. So I think there's some tools in the box, and we will be using them.
Okay, thank you very much, Heather. And finally, in this investment question, and by the way, do keep an eye on the comments coming in, because there are some wonderful ones. I'm going to come later on to an extra question or two, but I know, lots of us are talking about sort of how quickly some of these things need to happen. I thought it was just a great comment from Andy there about, you don't sort of start making plans for the future if your house is on fire. It's just an interesting kind of way of contemplating how quickly we have to get after some of this stuff. So finally, in this question then about investments, John Holland from Labour. John.
Yeah, well, the council has a pension committee with an investment subcommittee. We are talking about very, very large amounts of money here. The consortium we're in is investing about £45 billion. And clearly where the investments are made will have a big impact. Now, of course, the money belongs to the people who pay into the fund, the staff, but there is no conflict between an ethical investment policy and getting good returns, because one of the things we surely have learned over the last year is that investments in healthcare and pharmaceutical companies and so on are clearly good investments, and people are clearly prepared to spend large amounts of money on healthcare. So investments there clearly will have a reasonable return. And it goes further than that, because clearly as fossil fuels will be phased out, and actually remarkably quickly in the next few years, the alternatives are not really where they need to be. So investment in hydrogen as a fuel is obviously something to look at. Wind farms offshore obviously are now well established, but the electricity requirements for electric vehicles is going to massively increase the demand for electricity, and also reducing the need for travel. And a really good example is this meeting we're having now, because all of us are sitting at home. None of us have travelled to get to this meeting. So investing in electronics is clearly something that will pay returns in the future. And people who did invest in electronics are now reaping that benefit. So I think we all agree where we want to be. I don't think we agree on how quickly we need to get there.
Okay. Oh, sorry, John.
Well, my view is we need to get on with it.
Okay, great. I think there's probably, as they say, most of us, I suspect, in this regard, are preaching to the choir a little bit, especially to this assembled throng here this evening. But of course, as we can see in the chat, it is sometimes that we're not sure what the right direction is, whether this is the best way, and so on. Of course, we rely upon our councillors in the end to be making those decisions on our behalf, in the county or district or anywhere else. So this is why we've got you here this evening to put these questions to you. Okay, I'm coming next, and I think Gary will have to help me out here, because I've been looking at my list as to who I asked the question first last two, but I think I'm going to start with Jenny this time. And if I've got that wrong, then I apologize. So this is the next question. And I think this is probably right at the heart of lots of people's thinking around this. This question was phrased by Stephen Norrie from Stratford, and it is as follows. Transport is the source of almost half of the carbon emissions in the county. And it's widely acknowledged that as well as changing to electric vehicles, we need fewer cars on the road. But actually car use is increasing. because many people feel that it's more convenient for many purposes, more than walking, cycling or public transport. So in addition to facilities for cyclists, what policy should the County Council adopt to discourage car use? So let's start with Jenny from the Liberal Democrats.
This is perhaps one of the most emotive and most difficult areas to address. People are so wedded to the ease of being in their car. I mean, I live in a tourist town. We have park and ride to the north of the town, which is barely used because we have high-rise, fairly cheap parking in the town centre. And so why on earth would you actually park your car to sit in a crowded bus in a traffic jam to come into the town centre? I talk to residents quite often about we should be looking at a 20-minute town where it takes you 20 minutes from where you live to either walk to where you want to go, to cycle to where you want to go, to scooter to where you want to go. If you've got 20 minutes in a car, that should be quite a long distance. There's huge resistance from people even to park in the high-rise block at the end of the bridge of High Street and not park outside the shops. When you actually suggest to people you're going to take parking away from the centre of the town, all hell is let loose because people say, and so do the businesses, we want to be able to park outside the shop, go in and do our business and come back again. So it's addressing the resistance of people to give up their car on some. Let's start off with a few occasions. You don't use your car once or twice a week. You have to start cutting yourself. You have to start pulling yourself away from the dependency on cars.
Okay, thank you very much, Jenny.
Sorry, can I just add? Because I don't think electric cars are the solution to the car problem, to the transport problem. We've got to be looking at, and the COVID has actually caused a lot of problems as well, because where people were beginning to use public transport, we've pulled away from that because of the dangers of train travel and bus travel. So we really do have quite a problem, but it's actually tackling people's resistance to giving up their car and the convenience of the car. That's where we've got to focus.
Thank you, Jenny. And again, just keep an eye on the chat, everybody. I'm seeing from Chris, for example, just the latest one here, which is a realistic future is self-driven cars, and you won't need to own one. I was having an argument with my brother-in-law only last week, who's they have 4 of them in their family, and they've all got a car each. And it was just too much for me. Anyway, I had to stop talking to my brother-in-law. Jonathan, over to you for the same question. What are we going to do about this transport? It is extremely challenging, isn't it?
Yeah, and reading Stephen's question, I think he's trying, it sounds like he's interested in what we want to do specifically discourage car use. And I think my answer to that is, I think it's unfair to expect people to use alternative forms of transport if they're not safe and enjoyable for short journeys. I think about 40% of journeys within Leamington and Warwick are like within a couple of kilometres. And so we need to be really helping people to be able to take those short journeys safely and enjoyably without so that when we do need to use a car for longer journeys, then we don't get stuck in traffic jams. So I wouldn't be like overly penalising car use until we have actually got this walking and cycling routes and public transport in place. Now, unfortunately, in some ways, in some of the, the A46 link road and stuff, we're actually still putting tens of £1 million into new roads. So in that respect, things aren't going too well on that. So, so there's so much we can do to make cycling and walking safe and enjoyable for journeys to school and work and leisure. So that's got to be my priority. The one area where I think I would be looking at discouraging car use specifically is through neighbourhood and school zones. So in very quiet areas, you can actually put the speed limit right down and make the person in the middle of the road, the child playing kind of without having to fear cars coming through those areas. So I think the public are more and more ready for that as well. So that would be my sort of area of particular discouragement. We've just got to get the infrastructure in place for walking and cycling public transport before expecting people to get out their cars.
Yes, lots of us talk about the sort of the Dutch model, don't we, and sort of how other cities and countries and so on have dealt with this. So there's lots of possibilities, but again, I can see quite a bit of frustration around this about things not being done and not being done in time. And I have to say, just again, sort of, I could add my voice a little bit to sort of the speed at which things seem to change and take place. I think a snail could be considered quick. Heather, I move on to you. Same thing. How it says in the question about discouraging car use, but perhaps it's a wider question on transport too.
Yes, it is. And we're obviously currently working on our next local transport plan. It's just been out for its first stage of consultation, and it has the key themes of environment, economy, place and well-being. So it's covering all the points that Jonathan mentioned earlier. We do have policies in place to encourage the deployment of electric buses in Warwickshire. We're working with Coventry on that, and we're also working with them and the Coventry and Warwickshire LEP with regard to very light railway coming into Warwickshire to some of our key employment sites, which I think will be a big plus. We have also invested in safe and active travel, which is looking at how we encourage our children to walk and cycle to school. And we're just starting to think about the rollout of 20-mile-an-hour zones around schools as advisory, and that's coming through the system. Taking cars off roads in a rural area with no buses, not sure. Very difficult nut to crack. We have got a pilot in Rugby, which is a demand-led bus, which is basically a ring and ride that people can use and use their concession card, and it's fully disabled. It's a door-to-door service, which I'm quite interested in to see how that pilot runs and how we can perhaps expand that if it is successful and is well used. Obviously, COVID has had an impact on that because people haven't been travelling on buses. So we've got to get the whole system back up and running. I would say another thing is nationally, the introduction of E10 petrol, which I believe is coming along later this year, has the same effect on emissions as taking 450,000 vehicles off the roads. So that will have an impact as well. And I think I do agree about electric cars. As I've been walking around knocking on doors, I've seen that we are definitely becoming much more of a nation of purchasing electric cars.
Thank you very much.
Alan.
That's all right, don't worry. Thank you very much indeed. And again, I'm just keeping an eye on Gary in case he gives me a thumbs up or thumbs down. But I don't think we've heard from John on this topic. Is that right? Yes, good. Okay. The final word on transport for this particular question. And again, thanks everyone for your comments. They're really good. Please read them, everybody. And I can see how frustrating this particular topic makes people, and you have my utter sympathy. So let's, I'll begin to sort of up the ante a bit and challenge people a little bit more from here on in. But John, you get the final say on the transport piece here.
Well, the County Council at the moment has a plan for roadworks to get more diesel lorries onto our roads, and housing estates are being planned where the distances are too far to walk, the road's too dangerous to cycle, and the housing density too low for a viable bus service. So what we need is a fresh approach, and not things we might do. What I would suggest to the audience is ask your candidates what they actually have done. And in the 8 years I've been a county councillor, if walking is the most environmentally friendly form of transport, what do pedestrians need? They need wider pavements and they need to be able to cross the road. I've actually put in 8 pedestrian crossings in my years, 1 zebra crossing and 7 push-button traffic light crossings. As a local councillor, you can get these things done. I've also improved a number of informal crossings with refuges and building the curb out so that pedestrians are in the road for a shorter amount of time. We have been using developer funding to build cycle routes and completed the Aylesford School to Woodlow cycle route, which was a county council aspiration 20 years ago. But by just getting on and doing it, we had a new bridge over the canal, which cyclists can cycle over, paid for by developer funding. Just get on and get these things done. In terms of 20 miles an hour, we have put them in around our schools, in some of our schools in Warwick. We've got a 20 mile an hour zone in the town centre to reduce cars accelerating and decelerating. Accelerating is particularly polluting. And the Chase Meadow estate, a new estate, I've actually got a blanket 20 miles an hour put on the whole estate with the very active support from the residents. It's the first housing estate in the county with 20 mile an hour on the whole estate. So my suggestion is that residents work with their candidates and their local councillors, and carrot is always better than stick. If we give people an incentive to walk, make it possible. And one final thought, education is pretty important here. And I mentioned public health earlier. Public health is a very clever team of doctors in the county council, and they have said that the main cause of avoidable illness and death is people not taking exercise because they use cars. And I've actually compared it to smoking. Now, it took a long time to reduce smoking, but it has been done. It's not been abolished, but it's been reduced. And I think the same approach will work with cars.
Okay, John, thank you very much. I won't quite tell you off for taking too much of the limelight, but I'll let that one go past. But again, you can see some of the comments here, and a lot of the comments are really about, it's just kind of fine, the questions and talking, but really kind of time for talking's over. Why do we not set better policies, get the action taken, you know, kind of almost what's holding us back and what's stopping us. By the way, I just want to mention, because again, it's a lovely thing. Why do so many people take their kids to school by car? And something about the lovely idea of walking buses and encouraging our children to walk and so on. And I speak as someone who a parent, certainly the generation of my children, was that they sort of didn't seem capable of walking anywhere at all, let alone cycling to school. So I feel at least, 90% guilty of that. So I could do anything that helps us. So look, there's a next question. I'm going to actually skip one because it's sort of a little bit similar. I'll come back to it, but I'm going to be, I want to sort of press a point here. This is a much more political point, and so I'm expecting some proper fighting here. Let's see. Or at least some shouting about Jackie Weaver or something. This question is from, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. If I'm not, I apologize. Sachiko Nakada from Stratford. In the new county council, would your party support the appointment of a deputy leader who, like the present one, denies the threat of climate change? So we heard a little bit of a mention of this. So perhaps we just ought to sort of put this to bed for once and forever. Let's kind of find out what the story is here. For the life of me, I can't remember who started. I'll start with Jonathan Chilvers. I think I might be right, I might not.
Thanks, Alan. Yes, obviously we would not support a climate denier being in the council, and I just think that the current deputy leader, who is in charge of the finance of the whole council, being a climate denier, I think, and there are other people within the group that are a little bit sceptical. One of the people in the Conservative group called climate change interest a fad in the last year or two. So yeah, I think it's hindering us in Warwickshire having that person. I mean, I'm sure that Heather, I mean, I know the leader of the council says it doesn't hinder us in Warwickshire, but I find it difficult to believe it doesn't when he's the one that has to sign off the checks in so many different cases.
I'm assuming, can I just ask a related question, which is, I'm assuming this isn't sort of, that there is evidence based on, this. It's not a sort of just a rumour that this is the case.
Yes, no, if you go and look at his Twitter feed, Councillor Butlin, at CLLR Butlin, you can scroll through and make your own call and judgment on his view. But I think he makes it fairly clear in that context.
Okay, Thank you, Jonathan. Good. So yes, Heather, it's down to you to respond. It seems timely.
Yeah. Post-election, our group actually vote for our leader and deputy leader. We live in a democracy, so it's not about excluding or saying somebody's something so they can't be part of us. And if they're elected as a councillor, then they have a vote on that. But I would add, decision making in the council is through cabinet and the full council. It's not through an individual. And our actions speak louder than our words, in that every climate change amount of money that I have asked for, I have been given. I have money for the staff to put together the programme. I have money for the Warwickshire County Council Community Fund, which is £1 million fund going out to start projects up across the county. I've had money to support our carbon neutral plans, and we have plans how we decarbonise our buildings, which we're applying to government funds for. We already purchase 100% green electricity and have solar panels on our buildings. We've got additional schemes for larger solar panel installations in the planning and in the funding streams. So we are taking this agenda forward in Warwickshire, and whether he has his own personal views, it doesn't matter. The decision of the county council to be carbon neutral by 2030 is the aim that we're going for.
Thank you very much, Heather. And so perhaps John Holland, you can respond to that in due course.
Yes, I think the views of the deputy leader of the council matter a very great deal, particularly when the budget is within his remit and money is the way things are controlled. At the moment, the deputy group leader for the Labour group is Dave Parsons, who's a councillor for Polesworth. And Dave has been very committed to hydrogen as a fuel. And whether we have electric cars or not, and no, where we're going to end up with this is still a lot of research to be done. But the airlines think that the only way they're going to fly their aircraft is with hydrogen as a fuel. So it, without doubt, has a future. And we have a deputy group leader who is absolutely committed to resisting climate change.
Thank you very much. That's a very clear statement, I suspect. And finally, Jenny from the Liberal Democrats, in case anyone's not sure. What's yours view on this, Jenny?
I've had a number of discussions with Councillor Butlin in the past about his views on climate change, and he did actually give me a little book by Nigel Lawson in which he could prove that my views are wrong and his were correct. He is quite committed to the fact that climate change is not happening in the way that I think the majority of people here feel that it is. And I do think that does have an impact. But I must say that some time ago, Jonathan and I brought forward a motion on alleviating climate change or adaptation to climate change. And we also brought forward the motion on the climate change emergency. And I do think the opposition parties have actually worked together quite effectively to push the climate change agenda on the county council. And I do think the county council has moved to some extent, but as we've said already, we do need to move much faster. But I think if the opposition parties join together, we can actually make a fair amount of difference and actually move where we want to be, closer.
Okay, thank you. And look, I'm just going to reflect some of our listeners here, and thank you again for all of the questions and comments you're making. It's great to see this taking part. And I'm going to do what a number of people here are saying is, yeah, a little bit of that, that's all kind of fine, but what are we going to do about it, and when are we going to do it now? And people are saying, we've got to shout. Andy's saying it's time to start shouting about it, and the time to shout about it is now. And of course we know, don't we, unless we take action and demonstrate and make a big difference, then things don't come to the top of the agenda, or things don't sort of get actioned. So again, keep those comments coming, please. We can see all these and speak to them afterwards as well. Next question, again, I'm going to go to Heather first, I believe, this time. I hope I'm keeping track of who it is, whose turn it is. This says that from Peter Hain in Stratford, much attention is rightly paid in climate discussions to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. It's equally important to capture existing greenhouse gases from the atmosphere by tree planting or developing underground storage. What policy should the county pursue to ensure that the land under its direct control plays its part in this capture? And how should they encourage or force other landowners across the county to play their part? So perhaps, not just about reducing the emissions that we make now, but is there something about capturing those greenhouse gases and taking them out of the atmosphere? Is there something that we could be doing more and that the county be doing more about that right now? Heather.
Yes, thank you very much. This is quite a passion of mine. Living in a rural area near to a village called Bidley Woods, you would expect it to be. So we've been planting trees there for quite some time. And I know that a lot of people have been enjoying Brandon Woods and the woods all around our area during this pandemic, and they've been walking through them. The County Council, I chair a cross-party group again with the districts and boroughs. We have a commitment to planting a tree for every resident. We're advancing those plans. We've really got the mantra of the right tree in the right place to ensure that we take these forward and we're not ending up having to take these trees down in the future. That's not a good idea. So we have biodiversity in our county mapped. We know exactly where the areas are and which areas need to be improved, what we call our white areas. We're particularly keen to develop green corridors with this tree planting as well, to ensure the connectivity of and the biodiversity within the county. We're also undertaking trials around planting verges with carbon capturing plants. One of our staff members is a senior ecologist, and he actually lectures at a national level on this. Grass meadows also have the potential to capture carbon. So it's about those kinds of things and how we use them. For our farming community, DEFRA has launched a pilot of the Sustainable Farming Incentive as the UK moves away from EU schemes. So we'll be setting our own environmental land management approach. Can I just say that Warwickshire was the first authority to have made a written commitment to seek to achieve a net gain for habitat biodiversity, which will benefit climate change, both the mitigation and the adaptation. And Jenny will remember that I accepted totally all of the recommendations of the adaptation group that she chaired.
Okay, thanks, Heather. And I wouldn't be doing my job if I wasn't at least saying some of the comments that are coming in here. Feels a bit like sort of question time without the microphone being able to go straight to it, but perhaps we will be able to do soon. So there's some, I can't miss out this comment from Hazel. Are the trees you're planting just replacing the ones that have been lost by HS2? But I don't think we ought to go down the HS2 route just for now, because we probably haven't got all night to do it.
What I would say is they would say that they're planting them, but yeah, I totally agree, and I feel very, very disheartened when I see the damage that HS2 is doing.
Yeah, and from Lynn here talking about the carbon capture science, has it really sort of been proved? We don't seem to have sort of really got to the bottom of that. John, what about Labour's position here?
Yes, the County Council certainly should be using land under its control. On a specific point about trees, we used to have a policy that any tree removed for street works or any reason should be replaced by 2 trees. I've insisted on that being 3 for 1, so that if a tree is removed, it's replaced by 3 trees. And I don't mean just little whips, I mean proper, trees that will actually have an effect. The County Council owns small holdings, and keeping those actually in our ownership will enable us to have control over how the land is used. We are in a big problem because the district and borough councils have powers for waste collection, and obviously if they increase recycling, that reduces the waste disposal that the county council has to carry out, and waste disposal does generate greenhouse gases. And the County Council actually voted 7 years ago that we should merge with the districts and boroughs so that we can join up all these conflicts and resolve them. And it just hasn't been implemented. And we're now paying a very heavy price for that. The planning, which is the responsibility for districts and boroughs, doesn't join up with the County Council's environmental policies over things like road building. And just briefly, you skipped through the question on the A46, where the council is currently developing this or supporting the development of this to near motorway standard as a strategic route to bring traffic through Warwickshire that actually doesn't want to be here through traffic. And I can say that with absolute certainty, because when we had a Labour government, John Prescott said that the A46 is not a strategic route and these roadworks would not happen. So there's a very clear difference between Labour and Conservative there.
Thank you, John. I was going to come back to the A46. Doesn't everyone? So let me move on and talk to Jenny. Yes, Jenny.
Planting urban trees is really quite difficult. I mean, in my town, I've got 2 or 3 places where there used to be urban trees, and I've been working with the County Council to try and replace these probably 5, 6, even longer years, because it's incredibly difficult to get those trees actually replaced. I think it costs nigh on £2,000 a tree to get it replaced in a town centre, once you've got permissions to dig pavements up and all the rest of it. So planting urban trees is very, very difficult. There is a huge appetite in the communities to plant trees, but the one thing that the county doesn't want community groups to get involved with is planting trees, for very, very sensible reasons. If somebody goes along and puts a spade through a telephone or communications or gas pipe, I mean, who pays for the damage for that? So planting trees is really quite difficult, and you do have to work closely with the county for that. I understand that the county is working on some protocol at the moment to agree with community groups as to how they can actually plant wildflowers and biodiversity in their local areas on unkempt pieces of ground. It's rather slow in coming forward. We do need that very, very, very quickly, because communities are very, very keen to do their part in opening up the green corridors through the urban areas. And I must say that Stratford Town Council is in their neighbourhood plan, has a plan to keep the green corridors through the town.
Okay.
But it does need to work with the county to do that, but the county needs to speed up in actually enabling that to happen.
There's often a theme, isn't there, around sort of, not just the pace, but also the idea that sort of counties and organisations can work together. There does often seem to be a bit of a challenge and an issue there. Jonathan, anything different from you in this space?
Yeah, thank you. And just say, I think what we're seeing with HS2 destroying so much natural habitat is just deeply traumatic to see that happening in our area. I agree with actually quite a lot of what Heather said on this, in that I think the council have done some really good biodiversity mapping, and there's kind of that underlying understanding that you don't just randomly plant trees in the countryside and hope they grow. Like, if you don't, trees when they're young saplings need quite a lot of help and looking after, unless they've sort of got brambles around the bottom sort of to protect them and that kind of thing. And joining up those by, we haven't talked much about the ecological emergency that we've got, with the massive degradation of our species and that kind of thing. And so we want to make sure that when we're planting trees, that it's part of that more symbiotic relationship about species protection, other wildlife, other parts of nature. So I think we've got some really good principles there at the county. I now just want to see them put into action and see those corridors put in. The question mentions landowners. I think that, again, the council can play a lead. I wouldn't be forcing landowners, but I think there's loads that we can do to reach out and work on them, work with them. And that then plays into natural flood management for flooding as well. So I think there's like a whole fantastic range of stuff that we could be getting on and doing. And I just want to get on and do it.
Yes, well, that's a good thought, if nothing else. That we, as I remember someone who first employed me, they said we can do an awful lot with Keene. If people have the energy and the will and desire to get things done, it really does make a lot of difference. I'm going to move on to another question then, and I'm just aware that I'm trying to get through as many questions as we can before we kind of get pressed for time. So this one's from Belinda Pike in Leamington, and this is about education. So how would you ensure that the Warwickshire Education Strategy 2018 to 2023, I assume that's a document that's well known to many, is updated to take full account of the imperatives of climate change? So again, sort of to reflect that lots of us are talking about the urgency of this climate change, that something now needs to be done. You know, what is being done, and is this partly about education, and is there something required here? For the life of me, I have no idea who's going first, but perhaps you will. Let's just assume it's John from Labour.
Yes, thanks. Certainly education is Labour's agenda, and certainly this is key. There is a slight difficulty because, as you know, Dominic Cummings was employed about 10 years ago to design academy schools and take them out of the control of the county council. And in many ways, schools always had their own governing bodies anyway. And of course, the national curriculum specifies what it is that schools have to teach and what pupils have to learn. Having said that, there clearly is a role for the county council, because councillors, we are the elected representatives of our community. And, you know, we speak for thousands of residents because we've been elected to do that. And we can work with schools in a cooperative way. I'm sure all head teachers and governing bodies are well aware of the climate emergency and would like to play their part. There is an interesting thing with academy schools, is that the county council still has the responsibility of providing a space in a suitable school for every pupil. And if there aren't enough classrooms, then the county council has to build them. It could be from public funds. And we take the keys off of the builder and hand them straight to the company that is the academy school. And I think we can interpret providing a place in a suitable school to include a climate change emergency. And we could therefore justify supporting the governors and the head teachers and the staff in the resources they need to raise awareness. And as I keep saying, link this in with healthy lifestyles. It's the same agenda. A healthy lifestyle agenda will reduce avoidable illness, but it also will reduce the climate changing effects. And education starts from when you're born, really, and carries on for the whole life. So it's not just only schools we're talking about, but getting children's centres, nurseries, and after school colleges and universities. But there certainly is a very key role for the county council, which at the moment we haven't properly developed that, and it needs to be done.
Thanks, John. Thank you very much. So, education. Jenny.
Thank you. I spent my career as a teacher at Stratford High School, which is now an academy, Stratford School. The county still has considerable responsibility for primaries, which haven't become academies. And I think to capture children when they're very young, that is where the real training actually happens for a life. And so I think there is a lot of work that could be done with the primaries. I mean, the Liberal Democrats did propose in the recent budget that some money should be put aside to encourage schools to become eco schools in Warwickshire. Warwickshire used to be quite a lead on promoting eco schools. And that fell away, I think, with the first rounds of cutbacks way back in before I was a county councillor. I think that money was withdrawn. So I think we should be looking at encouraging eco schools, because that gives the framework for the school to be working on its plant, how it manages its energy, how it manages its water, how it manages its land, and how it educates the children through that management. So I think that is one way where we should be working. I think John's quite right that it's not just schools, it's the nurseries, and it's the all the community groups that we have. We should be looking at the community groups, and I think particularly we should be looking at people assemblies, being drawn together with people with particular interests to promote their own understanding of how they can contribute to making the changes that they need to change in their own lives, and educating themselves and their families.
Thanks, Jenny. I'm going to read two of the comments out here because I think they're just worth repeating, and thank you everybody for keeping the comments coming. It really is great. One from Juliet here that says, I had to stop teaching climate change for two reasons. It was increasingly difficult to teach it truthfully and not be seen as political. And it was difficult to teach the children that we'd destroyed their future. And then from Jackie saying, living walls, vertical gardens, living building. Milan has amazing living apartment blocks. So we could perhaps do a little bit more than we do at the moment. Or, of course, we can move to Milan. Where have we got to? We are with Jonathan, I think.
Thank you. Yeah. Yes, that question about teaching climate change without being political, I think I would be really focusing on encouraging children to connect with nature around them and understand the natural processes where food comes from, and lay that foundation of caring for the green spaces around them. And I think that can grow into then like having an understanding of what we're doing to our planet at the moment. So I think that. I think at the moment the county council is responsible for like maintenance of school buildings as well. And at the moment we've still put in gas boilers, which will be obsolete within a few years' time in our schools. So personally, if I was making decisions in the council, there would never be another gas boiler going into any of our corporate buildings or schools. We got to lead from the front for our children. There's no point in teaching them about this stuff if we're going to get that. And I hope that's something that other parties can commit to as well. The technology is there now to have low-cost alternatives to gas boilers.
Thank you, Jonathan. There are many alternatives, and I'm aware of many, and yet we always seem, usually for a financial reason, sort of not to take decisions that look in retrospect not so smart. Heather, the final word on education goes to the Conservatives.
Thank you, Alan. We've actually committed money in the budgets to survey schools as soon as we could. Obviously, the pandemic has not helped us with the timing on this, but we really want to ask them what support they need and how they want to take this forward. We have also, how we join that up with outdoor education in Warwickshire is quite key, I think, and the use of our country parks, how we can use Warwickshire Wildlife Trust, for example, who have Brandon Woods in my own area. I think young people are very passionate about these issues, and I certainly think we need to be able to give them the tools to help them understand, whether that's eco schools or whether it's other methods of doing it. I don't mind. I'd just like to hear from the schools what support they would like from us before we set a policy. We know that young people are passionate. Warwickshire Youth Council set climate change as one of their topics to discuss over the last year, and they've submitted a report to us. So, and that will affect our plans and how we take things forward.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we've got something here again, if a pretty straightforward. And by the way, again, great comments. A pretty straightforward sort of challenge, or just a question. And this has come from John Stott in Henley and Arden. Does the council, and by that, of course, it would be all about, you know, the council that we have elected and the councillors that we have that we can be expecting to represent us, does the council have a plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to net zero for the whole county and not just the council, with clear targets for 2030, 2040 and 2050? And if not, will it develop one under your leadership? What are or would be its main elements? So we can sort of easily understand that having a net zero for the county council makes sense, but what about net zero for the county? I guess that this means looking more broadly at the way in which we manage the governance of such matters if you make it a policy. So I think this time I'm starting with Jenny. I hope I haven't got that wrong.
Thank you. I've spoken quite a lot to the head of waste management about this, because the county does have measurements where it measures its own estate, and it can actually, and you can go onto the website and you can actually see these figures. It is managing its own estate. Whether it's managing it fast enough or not, that's another issue. But when you talk about the wider community, it becomes that much more difficult. But I do think we need to be looking at policies where we have to understand what the climate change policies are of the companies that we deal with. If a company does not have a clear climate change policy, should we be doing business with them? Should we not find another business? So then we can actually promote our principles of reducing carbon to the other companies around us. I also think that we need to be looking local as much as we can. We've got to buy the right products for the right job, but we should be looking as far as possible local, so we reduce our transport, the weight of transport, bringing goods to and from the council and its offices. And I do think we need to be working in partnership very much. We are a rural county, and we should be working very much in partnership with the NFU to help them and to help us produce the food closer to where it's needed. We've got the NFU in our area, we've got farms in our area. We need to be making sure that we produce as much food locally and cut the transport costs.
Okay, so Jonathan, same question. We're talking about net zero for the whole county. What do you think?
Yes, so it's not completely in the county council's gift to do that, but this is that third area of wider leadership that I was talking about at the beginning. So I think, so I'm not so interested. Obviously, we need to do it as soon as possible, and we need to play a leadership role in it. But so I want to see us, like Jenny said, all our contracts should stipulate that the products that we buy, knowing exactly how much carbon they produced, and then seeking to reduce that. So every business that we work with should have that in place. And yeah, then we should be working with all the other major CO2 emitters in Warwickshire to come up with a plan, but recognising that that isn't completely within the county's gift. But we should be playing that leadership role with the natural people in Warwickshire to come together with the major employers, with the communities, like actually the Green Shoots Fund that Heather mentioned at the start. That can be a part of this. And obviously the major thing, as I've said before, that we have we do have the influence on is the travel and the road strategy. So we can really be pushing ahead on that.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Net zero. I'm going to go to Heather next.
Thank you, Alan. Obviously, we've made a commitment as a council to carbon neutral by 2030, and we're absolutely focused on that. We've already reduced our direct carbon emissions by over 50%, and we'll be looking to a new waste strategy and how we deal with our waste going forward. We already buy all green electricity for our own use, and we're looking at how we decarbonise our buildings, which includes those gas-built boilers that Jonathan talked about. We also help our residents to buy green energy through our Switch and Save scheme, where people sign up and we do a reverse auction. So, you know, the bigger the better, to get a better price for our residents. And we have committed £1 million to our Green Shoots community funds to change people's minds about how they look at their community, and how they can address climate change within their community, because that's really quite important that we get everybody on side. We've also launched a Solar Together initiative, which again works in exactly the same way, Switch and Save. And the government has committed to net zero by 2050, and clearly we will have to have plans in place with the new county council coming through.
Thank you very much.
I could talk about the food forum as well, but I think I will probably leave that, because that is an initiative that looks at sustainability of food. I am constantly in touch with the NFU, so I know quite a lot about sustainability and how we buy local and eat local.
Okay, thank you very much, Heather. John, final word here on this one.
Yes, I think this is the biggest question of the evening so far. For the whole county to be carbon neutral, we don't have a plan, we don't have the beginnings of a plan, and we have an opportunity. The pandemic and Brexit have both caused us really serious problems with the economy. And clearly the effect of the pandemic is that a number of jobs will have gone, and the new jobs that replace them will be different. And the county council, through economic development team, can very much influence and support that. And they, need to move away from thinking of road building as the answer, because it isn't. The new future is going to be the knowledge-based economy, exploiting electronics, and very environmentally sound. We also have Brexit, where we actually don't have a Brexit agreement, because there's nothing about the finance sector, which was a key thing for the UK economy. And there are all sorts of other things missing from it. And, well, I think the attitude has to be, we don't have problems, we have opportunities. So let's start by saying, what are the opportunities in the new economy, which is going to be different to the old one, and design it in from the outset so that when it's up and running, it is carbon neutral. We've had to rebuild Warwickshire's economy before, after the 1980s, and Margaret Thatcher caused enormous devastation, particularly the north of the county. Maybe the south of the county has been hit harder this time. But we've got to start from the point of view that we're going to rebuild the economy of Warwickshire and get back to prosperity. The only way to do it is people working together in a cooperative way. Joining up the district and borough councils with the county council seems obvious, but joining up the political parties in the way I suggested right at the beginning, of moving away from the cabinet with portfolio holders who are not really on top of their subjects. Obviously they're councillors, they're not experts in everything, and working with getting people and getting all of the good ideas on the table and forming a consensus. With the one thing we're all agreed on is the target for carbon neutrality. Very good question.
Okay, so first of all, we'll say thank you for that question. I'm also just aware that time is ticking on. I'm going to just ask all of the councillors just a final couple of questions, and they're quite sort of, they're aimed at you sort of specifically, if you like, so just prepare yourselves. I will also just reflect some of the chat here as well, which again is great. Please keep it coming, and we'll make sure that it gets sent out to everybody. I think one of the things that's saying here, and I mentioned right at the start, didn't I, about BP, some people are saying, look, that it doesn't feel like there's an urgency here. It doesn't feel like we're sort of worried enough to do something better. And we're talking about targets like 2050, and it's too late. BP has set itself a target of being, zero carbon, net zero by 2050. and that's what they do for a living, is oil and gas. You'd think that if they can do it by that time, then surely to goodness we could do something a bit quicker in the county here. So look, I'm going to do my final little bit of questions here, and I said they're sort of a little bit almost sort of personal in nature. So the two questions are this. Peter Chaddock has asked from Stratford, in what ways is your lifestyle environmentally friendly? So in other words, sort of, you know, have you got a bit of a show yourself, if you like, that sort of you're living or walking the walk. You're not just talking the talk, because we've already heard a little bit about sort of how personal views might get in the way of some of this and sort of what your philosophy might be. So I have totally lost track of who it might be now, so I just don't know. Let me start with Jonathan, for you. So what are you doing in your personal lifestyle? Are you living, you know, this way already?
Thank you. I just want to say, absolutely, you know, people have said that it doesn't feel like there's an emergency. Absolutely, there is an emergency. And the 2050 target is absolutely crazy. There's only a 50% chance that it will be enough, even if we make it. It's like we're gambling with the whole planet by saying that we're going to aim for 2050. It's got to be 2030. And it's the consequences of not making it are terrifying for myself and my children. So we've been talking this evening about what Warwickshire County Council can do, and if I was running Warwickshire County Council, there would be a whole load of things that across the piece that I'd be looking to do on day one and week one. So just wanted to cover that one. Personally, like we've just had an air source heat pump installed because our gas boiler reached the end of life. So that's thing. I don't have a car, although I am insured on some other people's cars. We almost works on a carpool thing. I haven't flown since 2004, which I think I would love to be able to, but I'm not going to do it until there's a carbon neutral way of getting around the world. What I would say is, though, that people tend to come up apologizing to me for flying or for eating meat or whatever it is. I do eat meat. And I just think we're all on a slightly different journey. We're all trapped by society to some extent. We need to make these changes, but there's no point just feeling guilty about them and carrying on. So as I say, I'm gradually trying to reduce my meat use. So I might be ahead on some other things, but not on that one. So I think it's really important not to be judgmental in that way. I just think we've all got to face this together as and tackle these problems as businesses, as the community, and as government as a whole.
Thanks, Jonathan. Look, I'm going to move it quickly along and only give people sort of a minute or so to answer. But I think it's fair to say in this personal question here, and Gary, by the way, is just dropping me a little personal note here saying that this is the final question as it happens. So three answers to come. I have to say, Jonathan set the bar pretty high there. So good luck, all the remaining councillors. Let's find out how you got on in the, living your lifestyle that way. Heather, what about yourself?
I grow my own vegetables. I eat seasonally. I do eat meat, though obviously I eat a balanced diet. I have to say, working from home does it tend to encourage the odd extra biscuit. So need to get out there and do the walks and walk the talk around my area. Like to see improvements to the area and just generally making small tweaks. Recycling or reducing my use of stuff and thinking about that. Certainly on plastics, buying things that I can reuse. That is much more important to me. I go about litter picking a lot. I don't know whether this is just I hate seeing it, but certainly litter picking to me is one of the big things. It does make our environment look so rotten, and especially in rural areas. And also, obviously, I'm really keen to take all of this forward and to embed across our council our climate change credentials and make sure we take all of our plans forward.
Very good. Thanks, Heather. And by the way, no one will begrudge you a biscuit. I'm a great biscuit consumer myself. And, you know, definitely not. And thank you for your litter picking as well. I'm sure, as a comment was made down here, it's good. I can't see anything bad in that at all. Take a bag when you walk the dog. That's the way it goes. John, yourself.
Yeah, I don't drive, and I walk wherever I possibly can. And I also have on loan an air quality sensor from Public Health. So this is linked through my phone to the central computer. And as I walk around, it's building up a computer map of the air quality in Warwick. And what I found is that the main pollutants are the very fine particulates, most which come from tyres and brakes. And sadly, electric cars have the same tyres and brakes. So, you know, there's not a clear answer there. But I actually think that councillors, you know, we are elected to represent people, and that's where I can make the biggest impact. And in the centre of Warwick, we have an air quality management zone order in place. Other towns do as well. Actually, I was a district councillor, which is the Air Quality Authority, when we put that order on. And as county councillor, I've led in producing a traffic scheme which will bring the air quality right. So we actually started from what do we need to do to bring the air quality within safe limits. We actually got the scheme signed off by the Cabinet in 2016, 5 years ago. It could have been finished in 2 years, but the council, I don't know whether they just cut staff so there aren't enough staff to move it forward or whatever. The funding is there. And I think personally, my contribution is in that direction of encouraging other people and actually enabling and making it possible for other people to walk, cycle and so on.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. So Jenny, you're going to have the final word on this, I think.
I actually, looking back at my life, I feel really guilty about the impact that I've had on the planet and the things that I've actually done really without too much thought. But when I look at my grandchildren and look at the future that they might actually have to deal with, it makes me absolutely focused on doing as much as I personally can possibly do to reduce my impact. And as a councillor, to bring my decision making to bear. What I do personally, I mean, I cycle I do have a car. I don't use it very much. I cycle everywhere. I grow my own food. I shop as much as I can locally. I have PVs on my house. I'm incredibly lucky because I can afford to do all these things, which puts me in a very privileged position, which means that I should be working far harder to make sure that others can reduce their impact on the planet as well.
Okay. Well, look, first of all, thank you very much to all of our councillors for taking part in this hustings. I hope it's been a good listen for all of you. I also can see from all the comments that clearly you don't feel, you know, that I would imagine not, that all your questions are answered, or indeed that, you know, things are done to everyone's satisfaction. And I think what's important is that we absolutely use that energy and harness that energy to keep making sure that change is possible. And I agree with all the people saying, look, you know, an individual can't make a difference, but actually an individual's influence, of course, can make a difference. And the way that we live and behave ourselves, as well as the way that we influence others, does make a difference. I'm going to say as well, thank you to everybody for coming this evening and for all the comments that you've made and for everything that you've contributed to the evening, because without the chat, it really doesn't make any difference at all to just kind of listen in an echo chamber. So with that, I'm going to say, hand back to David to say just a few final words on behalf of the Alliance. And but from me, thank you very much to everybody for taking part so very well. David.
Well, everybody, thank you very much. It's been amazingly good debate and an amazing number of comments on the chat. I think it's wonderful to see how much people care. Thank you very much to all of the councillors. I'm delighted that we're all going to work together on this. Please, if you'd like to work with us, with the Warwickshire Climate Alliance, or you'd like more information from us, email us. I've just put the email address in the chat, or you could look for our website by typing in Warwickshire Climate Alliance. join a local group or contact us. We'll try to put you in touch with somebody or start your own local group. We need to work together. We can all learn from one another, and working together is one of the pleasures about this. It's not all wearing a hair shirt and giving up your car. It's discovering the sociability in working together to improve things. So I think it's a win-win. Everybody. Well, so thank you very much, and to Alan for chairing, to Gary for organising the technical side. I think it's been a great success, and I'm really very happy. So that's it for me. Good night. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining. Cheerio. Thank you, David. Good night, everybody. Have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Right.
Good night. Thank you.
Night.